October 4th. This is a regular assembly meeting and call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jeff?
Here.
Jay?
Here.
Taylor?
Excused.
Chelsea? Here. Mark?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Dave?
Here.
Okay, it's now time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance. Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have minutes to get approval for the regular assembly minutes of September 20th, 2021. I'd entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved. Second.
Okay, are there any changes? All those in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We will now move to item 4, amendment and approval of meeting agenda for today. Is there any amendments?
Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to add under new business, certification of election special meeting for Friday, this coming Friday, October 8th at 12 o'clock.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on that? Member Stan Gregor.
Actually, no, we can discuss it when I get to the action item. Never mind.
Okay, so all those in favor of amending the agenda to add that to the agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we will add that under new business, under the last item under new business. Okay, public hearings, there are none. Bid awards, there are none today. That brings us to item 7, persons to be heard related to today's agenda. And I understand we have a few people zooming or calling in. Clerk Thompson?
Yes, we do. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna allow Cindy Lynn to talk first.
And I'd like to remind everybody that's calling in or zooming in that you have a 5-minute limit and the clerk will keep the time on that, please.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, can you hear us? We hear you.
Yes. Thank you for your time, Assembly members. I just wanted to address quickly the sanitation provision for fines possibly in your proposal. My personal issues and problems with this include I, in the past, have used a 50-foot line that was cotton, wrapped around a tree twice to the trash can, plus a 2 to 3 inch bungee deal that was, well, it was like leather or vinyl. Anyway, and somebody stole that. The issue of putting the trash cans or the trash can and recycle inside the house, my pickup is Thursday mornings at 08:30. I cannot physically, I'm sick, get out at 08:30 to put those cans out. That's impossible. Moving them around is hard enough, but getting up in time before the pickup is just not even feasible. I wish to ask, not that I'll get an answer, but what is your agenda regarding why you're considering this? Is it to have everybody comply and have 0 bears? Bears are part of living in Alaska. They always have been. You all know that. Is it regarding the trash in the road as far as the appearance? I have 2 friends that pick up my trash. Normally, I do not have bears knock them over, maybe twice every 5 years, if that. So anyway, I'd certainly like you to consider this because I just cannot comply. And a fine seems to be like a patriarchal approach. I don't think penalizing people works. I think positive affirmation is a better route. But anyway, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony today. Clerk Thompson, would you put on the next speaker?
Yes, let's go to Dana Tinas, please.
Are you there, Dana?
Mute. Okay. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, you're coming in clear. You have 5 minutes.
Good deal. Okay. I am pleased that the proposed replacement disease ordinance removes the ability to compel vaccination. However, many of the sections are too open-ended or restrictive of common sense freedoms. Where is the right of appeal? Where is the right for a second opinion? And where is the timeline cutoff? The health officer has the power to forbid anyone from entering any premise where a sick person is. But what if that sick person is my child or my elderly mother? Do I wait around for permission from the health officer when time is of the essence? Section B is frightening to me. The health officer may compel anyone to quarantine for any length of time. How else do you interpret, quote, for such a time as may be necessary? And where is a suitable place? I can't be comforted by the thought that these are our people. This is our town. We care about each other. The Stanley Milgram experiments of the 50s and 60s taught us that almost all of us will obey the demands of someone they perceive to have authority, even when it violates their own conscience. I like section 9.04.040 better. The health officer is required to state the facts upon which directives are based. I like this stipulation very much, except what if they aren't facts? What if they are opinions, propaganda, or sound bites? How can these so-called facts be challenged? There needs to be room for that. Some platform, some ability to appeal. Dialogue is necessary in a free state. Our city manager published a proclamation this week, which already sadly violates the fact rule in calling the COVID shots safe and effective. That is a soundbite. Never have there been medications so obviously injurious and ineffective from the moment they were released on the public. Not just the VAERS database, the vaccine adverse event reporting system, with its deaths of over 17,000 now, when we know that reporting is less than 10% and perhaps less than 1% of that, but also the CMS system, wherein Medicare patients' information is logged. In July, a whistleblower affirmed under oath that as of July, 48,000 people had died within 3 days of shot administration. And effective? No. Sicknesses appear to go down for a brief time, then back up again in country after country. Great minds around the world continue to say we must face this virus and not keep suppressing it, which allows its virulence to grow. But if you do wish to minimize the presence of the virus, there is a much more effective way than masks. That is industrial hygiene. There are ways to dilute the volume of the virus in a room and destroy the virus. Dilution by way of more ventilation, and that means heating costs would go up, but air exchange is important. And destruction, there are a couple of methods I've written down here: needlepoint, bipolar ionization, ionized hydrogen peroxide, and a couple of other methods that sound promising and not too expensive considering the mitigation money that the school and the hospital have. And I'd be willing to share that information with anybody, although I wouldn't be surprised if Carl already knows about it and perhaps the people at the hospital. The face coverings do trap bacteria and moisture, but they cannot contain the viruses. Those sneak right through and around the edges where the gaps are. It's like a superhighway. It's time for some new ideas because what we've been doing hasn't changed things. Thank you. I'm Dana Tinas.
Thank you for your testimony today. Clerk Thompson, will you open up to the next person?
Okay, I'm going to open it up to Frederick Olson. And he's on here twice, so.
Hello.
Hi, Mr. Olson. Do you hear us all right? You're coming in fine.
Oh, good. I wonder if were some slides shared with you?
Yeah, we've got a printout, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, but I won't be able to share now with the Zoom.
Well, Mr. Olson, I just made you a panelist. If you turn on your video. I think we might be able to see you, and then how do I make it where you can share your screen? Right here. I think you can share your screen now. Do you have your video on?
I don't have any of those options available. It doesn't look like I have any of those buttons here.
Okay,
So I'll just, I don't want to take up
And-
any more of your time.
You have a 5-minute limit, so if you'd please start, that'd be great.
Oh, okay, yep. Kuthgansi Hinodikiaang. In the Haida language, my name means place of one's own. And I'm Frederick Olson Jr., and I'm the executive director of the Southeast Alaska Indigenous Transboundary Commission, which is a coalition of 15 of Southeast Alaska's federally recognized tribes, including the Petersburg Indian Association. And as we're speaking right now, the Tulsequah Chief mine continues to pollute the Taku River watershed since the late 1950s. And there has been a plan recently to clean it up and some money earmarked towards it, but there's still been no cleanup there. And so that remains a cautionary tale to the, well, that's nothing compared to the tailings dams that we're talking about. And the resolution that you have on the agenda later, the two main parts are a ban on tailings dams and support for a pause in the BC permitting process. And, you know, just upriver from Wrangell, not too far from Petersburg, in the Stikine River watershed, you have the Red Chris mine. And right now it's operating, and it has a tailings dam that's 341 feet high, which is a little over half as tall as the Space Needle in Seattle. And these are very disturbing. You know, they have to last for 2 or 3 centuries to hold the contaminated waste rock underwater. And we saw in 2014 the famous Mount Polly disaster, and that dam was only 130 feet high, but it caused the biggest mining disaster so far in Canada's history. And as one of the experts described, the designers simply hadn't taken into account that this was built over glacial silt. And one day, a section just slipped out like if you slipped on a banana peel. And what's coming down the road, you know, there's just more and more of these coming. The Kerr Sulfurets Mitchell project, you might have heard of as the KSM mine, which threatens the Unic River down by Ketchikan and the Nass River in BC. This would have 2 of these huge facilities, these dams, both of them over 100 feet taller than the Space Needle. And this is why there's more and more studies out that there's, you know, the more of these facilities you have, the more disasters there'll be. Like every 10 years, there's 2 of these, and we're just having more and more of them. And they just sit out in the middle of nowhere and no one's watching them. And they just hope that that they stay together. And that's not probably going to do very well for our rivers. And our group we've been corresponding a lot with British Columbia ministries because we know we need to meet directly with them in this issue. And we were very close with the Ministry of Energy, Mines, and Low Carbon Innovation. And we asked to get in an agreement with them. And the Minister Ralston had said that he understood, and we had brought up the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and what's going on with BC with their own version, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. And he understood this and knew that they would need to work with us, but he said it would take time for them to conduct some internal reviews for his and several other ministries. And so we asked the BC Premier, Horgan, that during this time, there be a pause in the permitting process because they need to work with Indigenous people by their own legislation. And so these are the generation of this resolution and why we are asking you to support the pause in the permitting process and a ban on the tailings dams. And the Petersburg Indian Association, before we had this campaign with Salmon Beyond Borders, and before we had this, the Petersburg Indian Association has supported our calling for the pause in the permitting process. I hear the time. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you considering this very, very serious topic. Ganesh Chish, thank you.
Okay, thanks for your testimony today. Technical difficulties. And I believe we have another person under items related to the agenda.
We do. Let's go to Jill Whites, please.
Hi there. I believe that Brianna Walker is going to be presenting today on behalf of Salmon Beyond Borders. I'm here to answer questions and listen in if that works.
You bet.
Thank you.
Okay, Brianna, go ahead.
Good afternoon, City and Borough of Petersburg Assembly members and Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. As Fred said, I believe you have materials in front of you in your packets that include some visuals as well as a map that will help solidify my comments this afternoon. My name is Brianna Walker. I'm the campaign coordinator for Salmon Beyond Borders, and I'm joining you today from Occoquan and Shingadani, the ancestral and present homelands of the Occoquan Tlingit peoples in Juneau, Alaska. Salmon Beyond Borders is a community-driven campaign. We work closely with commercial and sport fishermen, community leaders, tourism and recreation business owners, and concerned citizens in collaboration with tribes and First Nations united across the Alaska-British Columbia border to defend and sustain our transboundary rivers, jobs, and our salmon way of life. I ask you to please carry forward this new transboundary rivers resolution of support, calling for a permanent ban on tailings dams and for a temporary halt to the permitting, exploration, and development and expansion of Canadian mines along Alaska-British Columbia transboundary salmon rivers until the United States-Canada Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909 and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples are upheld and an international agreement on watershed protections is implemented. As of September 27th, 2021, the following tribes and municipalities have passed the resolution, have passed this resolution: the Wrangell Cooperative Association, the Sitka Tribe of Alaska, the Craig Tribal Association, the Organized Village of Cake, the City and Borough of Sitka Assembly, the Tenakee City Council, the Pelican City Council, and the Saxman City Council. Additionally, several dozen prominent community members, businesses, and organizations have signed on to the community resolution of support, and over 100 individual Alaskans have signed on to a letter to President Biden asking for the same temporary pause on new mining activity and a permanent ban on tailings dams along the Taku, Stikine, and Unuk rivers. As you all know very well, the Taku, Stikine, and Unuk are world-class transboundary salmon rivers that originate in Northwest BC and flow into Southeast Alaska. These rivers have been centers of culture and commerce for thousands of years. They are hotspots of biodiversity, climate refugia, and birth all 5 species of wild Pacific salmon. They also serve as economic powerhouses, contributing $48 million annually to Southeast Alaska's economy, $34 million in direct spending, over 400 jobs, and almost $20 million in labor income towards Southeast Alaska's annual multi-billion-dollar fishing and visitor industries. Historically, these 3 rivers have produced 80% of Southeast Alaska's king salmon. However, in 2017, the Unuk River Kings were listed by Alaska Department of Fish and Game as stocks of concern. And most recently, the Board of Fish has recommended that the Taku and Stikine River Kings also be listed as stocks of concern. While transboundary salmon runs continue to decline, the BC mining boom in the Taku, Stikine, and Unic watersheds continues unabated. British Columbia has staked 20% of these watersheds with mineral claims, and most of the dozens of operating and proposed mines in this region include one or more tailings dams. The industrialization at the headwaters of these rivers is the largest threat to some of the last remaining wild salmon habitat on the planet, and BC's archaic mining laws are not strong enough to protect water quality, wild salmon, and the communities that rely on them. The Stikine River is particularly threatened by BC's mining activity. Almost the entire riparian corridor of the Iskit, which is the largest tributary of the Stikine, is staked with mining claims. You'll see that on your map of the Stikine that's included in your handouts. There are multiple mega mines that are at stages of exploration and development within the Stikine watershed, in addition to the operating open pit Red Chris mine, which my friend and colleague Frederick Olson mentioned in his comments. You've seen pictures likely of the Mount Polly tailings dam and that at Red Chris. Shaft Creek and Galore Creek are also proposed in the Stikine. You should have a graph that highlights the size and scale of those projects, as well as the proposed KSM in the Unic. These projects rival the size of the proposed Pebble mine in Bristol Bay. Following BC's tailings disaster at Imperial Metals Mount Polly mine, as well as 2 fatal catastrophic failures in Brazil, there has been a global spotlight on tailings dam technology. An audit by British Columbia's Mine Audits and Effectiveness Unit, an independent team in the provincial government's Ministry of Energy, Mines, and Low Carbon Innovation, has found mining code changes brought in after the Mount Polly disaster are ambiguous, open to multiple interpretations, and lack the definition needed to ensure compliance, verification, enforcement. In short, the policy in theory in British Columbia may be world-class as claimed by their government, but if it's not being implemented on the ground, then BC's mining isn't any safer than it was 7 years ago. Most tailings storage facilities or tailings dams are high-risk structures. Research published in 2015 demonstrated an emerging and pronounced trend since 1960 toward a higher incidence of serious and very serious tailings dam failures, and noted that most had occurred since 1990. After Mount Polly, the British Columbia Auditor General investigated the tailings dam failure and found that BC could expect 2 tailings dam failures every 10 years under business as usual. So despite concerns from communities and lawmakers downstream, BC is still feverishly rushing through massive open pit gold and copper mines that include colossal toxic waste storage facilities or tailings dams at the headwaters of our shared iconic salmon rivers. This is happening without the meaningful input of communities and tribes in Alaska, and despite a global push to ban earth and tailings dams. We humbly ask that you consider carrying this resolution forward and join the growing collective of Southeast Alaskans that are calling for this temporary pause and permanent ban on tailings dams to defend the Taku, Stikine, and Unic. I'll be on the line if you have any questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Walker. Is there anyone else that wants to speak under items related to today's agenda?
Unless Heather Hardcastle, she's on the line. I'm not sure if she is here to speak. I will give her a chance.
Ms. Hardcastle, are you there? And if you are, do you intend to speak today?
Yeah, hi there. I'm also with Salmon Beyond Borders with Brianna, and I'm here to help with questions if necessary, but I don't need to speak in addition to them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe we'll need to have some questions for you or your group if we move this forward for an action item in a further meeting. So thank you for testifying today, everybody. So, all right, if there's no other people that want to talk. Oh, Mr. Lynch. Yeah, we have one in the audience. That's been a first.
I was hiding in plain sight. Mr. Mayor and Assembly members, I'm Brian Lynch, and I'm here representing both Rivers Without Borders and myself. And we are in support of moving item 17A, the Rivers That Feed Us resolution, forward for Assembly action. I also want to thank you for your past efforts in support of the efforts to minimize detrimental effects of the extensive ongoing and proposed mining in the BC Alaska transboundary region. I think Brianna and Frederick did a good job of summarizing what this resolution is all about. A couple things I want to add. I want to make very clear that the economic driving force behind most of these mines in this region is gold. It's not copper or other strategic metals necessary for climate change abatement. It's literally why this area is referred to as BC's Golden Triangle and not the Copper Kettle or some such name. A couple things that we're concerned about here that I know Rivers Without Borders particularly is the cumulative effects of all these mines in this region. The cumulative effects framework that BC has is weak and not backed by really enforceable regulations. The Eskay Creek revitalization cumulative effects only includes the operating Brucejack, Red Chris, and Silvertip mines. Silvertip is not a Trans-Mountain River system. It does not, they don't analyze the potential cumulative effects like with the KSM mine, even though Brucejack and KSM are literally a stone's throw away from Eskay Creek. We need the potential cumulative effects analysis rather than an after the fact cumulative effect analysis. And this is why a pause in permitting and further mine development is imperative, and why something even like an IJC reference is definitely in order to take a look at what the potential cumulative effects may be. Another issue why we really need a pause is a disturbingly close association the BC government has with the mining industry. During that Eskay Creek revitalization meeting on September 15th, and Eskay Creek, let me point this out, was a mine that operated between 1994 and 2020. It was an underground mine. It was put in care and maintenance for about a year, and now they want to reopen it again, unfortunately, as an open pit mine. Too much of that meeting on September 15th was dedicated to the positive history of the value of the project and all the jobs and the economic opportunities it will provide. It kind of struck me as a tag team between government and Skeena Resources, which is the company that's working with the Tahltan Central Council to revitalize this mine. Basically, it just provided further evidence that there literally is no daylight between industry and government in BC. We've seen this in other instances as well. And as far as the pause goes, I want to point out that your resolution, excuse me, that your resolution 2019-13, which you passed on November 18th, 2019, actually advocated a sort of a pause in requesting that the BC provincial government conduct a new environmental assessment of the Galore Creek mine and the Stikine-Iskut drainages. So anyway, that's all I have today. I'll remain here in the chambers if you have any further questions.
Okay, thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony today, Mr. Lynch. I see no other people in the audience it looks like they'd be interested in this item. So is there anyone else on the line, Clerk Thompson?
At this time, there are people on the line, but I have not been alerted that they would like to speak.
So what is the rule that we go by on that?
Well, I do ask that people sign up at least an hour before the meeting to speak, but I have been trying to accommodate those since it's a new procedure. But I think we are doing well. I think we can move on to the next agenda item.
Okay. We will now move to item 8, and that's persons to be heard on items unrelated to today's agenda. Is there anyone in the queue for that item, Clerk Thompson?
No one signed up to speak, and I do not see any hands being raised.
Okay, well, we'll move to item 9, boards, commission, and committee reports. There are none. There are no items under the consent agenda today. That brings us to item 11 on the agenda, and that's report of other officers. Excuse me, and that's a SEPA update. Utility Director Hagerman and Assembly Member Lynn will provide an update on SEPA activities. So Mr. Hagerman or Mr. Lynn, whoever would like to start off the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to read the report that's in the packet into the record for the listening public. So following the regular quarterly meeting of the SEPA Board of Directors, I'm happy to provide this update on the happenings of the agency. Director Lerner was on vacation, so I stood in as Peter Sru's voting member at the meeting. In addition, a special meeting was held after that in honor of longtime CatchCam manager and board member Carl Amelon. And I'll touch on that at the end of the report. So first item, submarine cable project is complete and was highly successful. SEPA staff negotiated the assumption of risks associated with weather delays. It's a big part of the laying of the new cable and recovering the old cable was weather dependent. And they had perfect weather during the actual operation, but that wasn't known when they were negotiating the contract. So SEPA basically assumed the risk of the weather delays associated with the recovery and laying of the new cable, and effectively removed over $2 million in contract costs in exchange to pick up the risk of $258,000 a day for any delays experienced during that operation. With only one day of delay in that operation, the effect was really outstanding on the contract for that work, saving over $2 million. The debt service on the submarine cable bond sale will require about $790,000 per year in payments. And the total debt service of the agency, including this work and other debt, is about $2.2 million per year up until fiscal year 33, when it will drop back down to just be the debt on the submarine cable. It's part of the presentation by the CEO. SEPA has sent the damaged ends of the failed submarine cable. There's still an outstanding issue of an insurance claim on that cable. The cable was insured, and now the agency is seeking to collect on that claim. So the ends of the cable were sent to an independent lab, and basically the $5 million insurance policy hangs in the balance of that evaluation. On-site evaluation by SEPA and the cable consultant that they had on staff indicated they felt that the claim would be successful, but we wait to hear what the lab has to say, and SEPA stands ready to challenge anything that's not in its best interest, and therefore not in the best interest of the member utilities. There is a discussion that has started on purchasing a spare triplex cable, much in the same design that was put in the Stikine crossing from the same vendor that provided that cable. There are different parameters, design parameters needed for that cable to basically to address any crossing on the north end of the SEPA system. So there will be some work on determining exactly what design parameters need to be in place for that purchase. If it goes forward, the current estimate for the cable to have on hand is about $4.5 million. So it's a big purchase, but it basically eliminates a lot of risk with the submarine cables and allows us to have a spare there and ready. And we can basically run existing submarine cables to failure, knowing that deployment of the new one could be right around the corner. Discussions of the wholesale rate from SEPA for power purchases is continuing, and the CEO is planning to have some kind of a scenario in front of the board in the December 2021 meeting for consideration. Presently, it looks like there's a need for a 1 cent per kilowatt hour increase to the wholesale power rate. And that includes the debt service on the cable, the addition of a comprehensive vegetation management plan, and other general inflationary increases to agency expenses. There's been no determination from the board on how that increase could be rolled out. And I can tell you that Member Lynn and myself are in favor of a phased approach to that for sure, to roll it out in over a number of years, hopefully. As an aside, the SEPA staff is working on a video presentation and an article for a major industry publication that details the submarine cable replacement project. It was a really fascinating and well-run project, and the SEPA staff is hopefully going to have that video and presentation done soon so we can share it with the assembly. It should be very interesting. Let's see, lakes are still full after last weekend's heavy rainfall. Of course, we're still spilling, have been spilling in the SEPA project lake since June. That continues. When we have lots of water, it actually allows the legacy projects in Ketchikan and Crystal Lake here in Petersburg to generate power more. So sales do lag for SEPA, but a strong sales in late spring of this year have us right on track with our budget. As I mentioned, the board did approve a vegetation management plan. It's very comprehensive and provides a 15-year rotation schedule for cutting brush and trees within the along the intertie route and other transmission areas of the agency. It's a very important aspect, as we saw this last Friday, you know, when we have large storms like that, if we have vegetation issues, they really show up and they cause damage, and a lot of money is spent to fix that. So I'm happy that the CEO took the time to put that together, and I think it's going to help all member communities in the long run. Let's see, the SEPA's auditor made a presentation, and SEPA's books look good. No issues there. And then lastly, on September 17th, SEPA called a special meeting in order for the board and staff to honor Carl Amelon, longtime City of Ketchikan manager and a current SEPA board member. The agency read aloud a proclamation of recognition and appreciation for Mr. Amelon's service to the agency and his excellent work as KPU's manager. Carl had been serving as Ketchikan's manager for over 26 years and leading KPU for over 23 years. That's just astounding to me in a public position like that, someone had such longevity and is so well respected. Unfortunately, Carl succumbed to illness and passed away before he could receive the recognition for his service to the community, agency, and region. Many current and former SEPA staff members, board members, and city staff provided testimony of respect at the meeting and appreciation for Mr. Amelon's service during his time with Ketchikan. That's my report. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hagerman. Member Lynn, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just 2 points I'd like to make. One is that debt of $790,000 a year is spread between 3 communities, since we are an authority, you know, serving all 3 communities. As if we had to eat that debt ourselves, we'd be in deep trouble. Second point I'd like to make is the having the decision we have to make related to the a spare submarine cable. That would, if it's just a matter of time before we have another failure. Hopefully we got another 10 years out of some of them, but all of them are over 30 years old. And so the question, the decision of the board now is, do we put one on hand? Because that would really significantly reduce the amount of time it would take to put a spare in, 1, and 2, and as Carl says, to take care of the risk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carl and Bob for giving that report. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of questions for either one. I've been looking at the SEPA notes for the last couple of years, and most recently on the March 30th, 31st, and May 13th, there's discussion about hydrosite analysis for an extension from Ketchikan to Metlakatla and Petersburg to Cake. Is that something that is being planned in the short term, or is that a long-term plan that SEPA's working on?
Want me to take part of it, Carl, or the related to hydrosite analysis? We've been looking, one of the things last winter, if you remember, we were very close to being maxed out on the amount of power that SEPA could provide to the communities. And we were, Carl can talk probably better parts of this, but we were, on diesel power at the same time. So we've been looking at alternative generation sites, and that's about all I can talk about this time because a lot of it right at this point is totally proprietary. And, but we have been taking a very, very detailed look at that, that part of it. Do you want to take the next one, Carl, there, if you would?
Well, yes, I will. Thanks. And I'll just add just a little bit to that, the hydrosite analysis has been a long process, but it's been extremely comprehensive. And I think we are, as a board, about to see a proposal come forward in the public portion of the meeting for the next steps towards a project, but that's really all we can say right now. On the extension of lines to Metlakatla and Cake, pretty much those were executive session items as well in the last meeting. And essentially the CEO was just apprising the board on any details, any additional information that he was aware of. I wouldn't say that necessarily there's a plan for that. It was just an update to the board on what is happening with those issues.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions on the assembly on the SEPA report? Okay, thank you for that report, guys. Next, that brings us to Petersburg Medical Center update by CEO Hofstetter.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Phil Hofstetter, CEO, Petersburg Medical Center. A few updates here with, first one is with COVID. Obviously, we're experiencing an outbreak right now. Started on September 20th. And since that time, we've had 54 positive COVID cases. A few of those have fallen off. Currently, the active count is 35. Encouraging facilities to mask inside. Distance and vaccines obviously are a way out of this. So please contact public health or our COVID information line at 772-5788 if you'd like to schedule a vaccine. We're doing boosters, third dose vaccines, and also first dose. We're running up against some scarce resources. We have monoclonal antibodies that have been provided by the state, and we provided a number of those, and we certainly are not getting any of the states in short supply, so we can't renew that. So we are working that as a scarce resource. We also have done 500 Cepheid tests, which is the rapid test in-house last week. And so we're trying to prioritize those this coming week. So the walk-up testing, the asymptomatic testing will likely be send outs this week as we're using or monitoring those tests. I want to thank the school for doing really an amazing job on keeping us informed and we're working with the school. They're doing their own testing, which it helps enormously on us to make sure that we're not using up our supply, but also having, if there's a COVID positive, identifying it right away. So real kudos to Erica and her team on doing an amazing job. I know it's been real tough on that staff. The state has instituted a crisis standard of care for many hospitals. Matsu, YKHC, Providence Regional, AMC have all done their own crisis standards of care. That means when someone comes into the facility, they have to actually make very difficult decisions on how to manage that care based off of resources. There's a meeting on with the state, DHSS, the Alaska State Hospital Association, and the hospitals on whether to do that as sort of a blanket statement across the board in the event that any community sort of falls in that category. And that is likely to happen. Any questions on the COVID situation before I jump to the next part, which is the PMC board update?
Brimley?
Thank you. My question's kind of related to that crisis standard, that labeling, what that could mean. I believe I saw the Petersburg Hospital being on a list provided by the state regarding that. So could you just for people who hear that, not sure what that means?
Yeah, crisis standards of care is sort of, it's a status, and hospitals can do it on their own, or they can submit through an application to the state to follow protocols around the crisis standards that the state provides.
Sorry. And son.
Yeah.
We back?
To go?
I think we are.
Okay.
Okay, I just had to talk louder to get my green light on. Okay, Mr. Hofstadter, will you continue? Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. To answer the question, when you reach a crisis standard of care, that means a medical decision has to occur when someone comes to the facility, and how to triage them, basically based off of what's occurring with the emergency and what resources are available. Essentially, when you provide that at the state level and fill out the application, it's a liability protection in the event that there's a bad outcome in those situations and there's a claim against the facility. So it's a liability. It really just protects the facility for making tough decisions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Demetri, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Phil, when will the booster be available to the general population?
It is available for certain, for the general population. I would, if you had a Pfizer dose, that's the one that's been approved. So I would contact the hospital at 772-5788, and they can answer that question.
Questions? And you have more on your report?
I do. I'd like to just cover an update from our last board meeting, if that's okay. At the last board meeting, we had an approval for, the board had approved the resolution, and this is board resolution 2021-01, and this is a resolution that it mimics the resolution from the assembly made related to the planning for a new hospital facility in Petersburg, and I'd like to read it into the record if that's okay. So this is a Petersburg Medical Center Board Resolution 2021-01, a resolution supporting the planning for a new hospital facility in Petersburg to be completed in phases. Whereas the Petersburg Borough Assembly and the Petersburg Medical Center recognize the need for quality healthcare for the residents of Petersburg, and whereas the Assembly and the PMC Board recognize the substantial changes in healthcare delivery, healthcare regulations, privacy concerns, treatment processes, equipment, communications, and procedures. And whereas the current health facility for Petersburg Medical Center is nearing 40 years of age, and its infrastructure can no longer be remodeled to accommodate necessary upgrades, making the existing facility in need of replacement. And whereas existing Petersburg Medical Center departments are in need of more space to meet the needs of the patients and staff, accommodate technical upgrades, and accommodate more modern medical equipment. And whereas the Assembly has stated that the cost of building a new facility exceeds the borough's ability to finance or bond for the building project, making it imperative that the building project be completed in phases as external sources of funding become available. And whereas the PMC Board supports the concept of building a new hospital in phases, and whereas the Assembly agreed to provide one of 3 sites of Petersburg Medical Center, to Petersburg Medical Center as part of the planning for construction of a new hospital. And whereas the Assembly supports Petersburg Medical Center moving forward with geotechnical work so that a specific site can be designated by the borough to Petersburg Medical Center for the planning for a new hospital. Whereas the Assembly has passed a resolution in support of the PMC board moving forward with phase 2 of the building process to bring the selected site for the new hospital building to shovel-ready status. Now therefore be it resolved, the PMC board, number 1, thanks the Assembly for its resolution supporting the PMC board and Petersburg Medical Center in the planning for a new hospital facility in Petersburg to be completed in phases. And 2, seeks to engage the public and develop a plan for a new facility that will meet the needs of Petersburg Borough residents for healthcare services into the future. And 3, will continue to participate with the Assembly in the planning for a new facility. And 4, supports the manager and staff working with the Petersburg Medical Center Chief Executive Officer and potential contractors in connection with planning for a new facility. And 5, will continue to seek external financing to the new facility. And lastly, 6, will continue to keep the Assembly updated on the status of the new building project. This was signed by our board chair and myself, and this was approved. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hofstadter. Any questions on the last part of Mr. Hofstadter's presentation? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hofstadter, for your update today. Okay, that brings us to the mayor's report. October election. The municipal election will be held tomorrow, October 5th, 2021, in the community gym from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. For more information, please contact Clerk Thompson at dthompson@petersburgak.gov or 772-5405. And next item is Domestic Violence Awareness Month proclamation. And Clerk Thompson, I believe you were going to read
Yes, I will.
that. Yeah, copy of it, so I guess I'll wait till you're done and I'll declare the declaration.
I can bring it up to you to finish it if you need it. Okay. Mayoral proclamation, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, October 2021. The Petersburg Borough, in recognition of the critical work being done by domestic violence victim advocates and allies, encourage all citizens to actively engage in the scheduled Domestic Violence Awareness Month activities in October, organized by Working Against Violence for Everyone, WAVE, and other national organizations who are working towards the education of domestic violence. Domestic Violence Awareness Month is nationally recognized each October to generate awareness of violence and to promote taking action. More prevalent than most realize, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience domestic violence in their lifetimes. Anyone, regardless of gender, race, sexuality, sexual identity or orientation, or socioeconomic status, can become a victim of domestic violence. This year's campaign theme, #EveryoneKnowsSomeone, strives to highlight how common domestic violence is and that it is more than physical violence. Petersburg joins with others across the state of Alaska and nationwide in supporting domestic violence victims and survivors, the advocates and organizations who serve them, and holding offenders accountable in the Petersburg Borough.
I found it, Clerk Thompson. Therefore, I, Mark Jensen, Mayor of Petersburg Borough, hereby proclaim October 2021 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month and October 21st, 2021 as Wear Purple Thursday. So we've got a few weeks to find something purple. Okay, I'd like to add a few things that I didn't have in print here. First of all, I'd like to wish condolences to the family of Ted Smith. Ted passed away yesterday, and I'd like to say that he, just recognize him for all the time he put in as mayor of this community of Petersburg. I'd like to also thank Taylor Norheim for his service on the Assembly the last 3 years. A little note that I mentioned at the last meeting, I won't be at the November 1st meeting. I won't be able to call in, I'll be out of the state. So Member Stanton Greger, if you'd please chair that meeting. I'd also like to thank Petersburg Municipal Power and Light for their work Friday night through that horrible storm. Got home at 6:15. I was one of the neighborhoods that was out of power, and it was horrible out. It was, and it was 2.5 hours. I had my power back on, and there was another issue out around 9 Mile. So thanks for your diligent work. And tomorrow, as I mentioned earlier, is election day, and don't forget to participate. Please vote. And that's it. I'll turn it over to the manager for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Youth basketball has been further suspended due to the COVID situation. We're hoping to restart it on October 19th, but we'll not know about that until we get a little closer to there. The streets crew assisted Parks and Rec with the removal of the derelict staircase at Eagles Roost Park. They're still working on seasonal road maintenance, and we'll start prepping for winter soon. The crew responded to a broken water main on 3rd Street that occurred on Saturday, September 25th. The failed section of transite main was replaced with a length of ductile iron, thanks to all of our employees, streets and water department, who worked well into the night to get the job done successfully. We did add some additional parking and fix the failed driveway culvert and remove some rotten trees down at Sandy Beach Public Works, as well as the Parks and Rec folks. Work continues on the motor pool shop repairs, although the COVID outbreaks have sidelined some contractor personnel and slowed down progress. We are still pushing to have motor pool operations moved into the rebuilt space before winter arrives. We continue to have problems with new vehicles due to the chip shortage and various other supply chain disruptions. This has impacted us in the form of greatly increased lead times for new vehicle procurements, especially light duty vehicles like pickups and SUVs. Fire, EMS, and SAR are training in person, but must follow COVID mitigation measures. Sandy, are we still allowing walk-in traffic or are we shut? Okay, I didn't, thank you. The fire station is open to walk-in traffic. However, masks are required inside the building, and we are not allowing group tours at this time. The training rooms remain closed to the public. The visitation continues at assisted living. Call 772-2445 with any questions. Masks are required to be worn in all borough buildings. Please do not visit if any symptoms of being ill, or if you've traveled, consider a COVID test prior to visiting. State of Alaska licensing inspection for assisted living took place on September 20th and 21st. All went very well. October 7th, DirecTV staff will be in town to begin the switch from cable TV to satellite TV in all the apartments at assisted living and Petersburg Elderly Housing Building. Sheila and staff are working with PMC residents and POAs, powers of attorneys, to set up booster shots for residents who have had the Pfizer vaccine and want the booster. State of Alaska's ARPA business relief program is open until October 19th. Eligibility is limited to Alaska-based for-profit businesses with an active state of Alaska business license. Businesses exempt from licensing will need to provide proof of the required license, for example, a limited entry permit. Link can be found on the borough's COVID-19 information page under resources for businesses and organizations. Molly's been working with Alaska DNR to verify property ownership, existing leases, agreements, and other encumbrances on land around the Papakew's dock and ramp. She's also been working with the PD on the E911 system to provide the GIS data for that system. The 911 system is currently being installed, and training has started for the employees on the new system. It's expected to go live this month. USDA, including the Forest Service, Rural Development, and Natural Resources Conservation Service, are strategizing to obtain investment ideas, seek out short and long-term opportunities, and identify barriers that impact federal investments in Southeast Alaska. USDA initially committed up to $25 million based on local priorities for short-term investments in various areas, including fisheries and mariculture, recreation and visitor services, tourism, sustainable timber management, transportation, water, wastewater utilities, housing, and so on. The U.S. Forest Service is accepting submissions for investment ideas through October 19th. Check out the Southeast Alaska Sustainability Strategy, SASS, at forestservice.usda.gov harbor.gov/Tongass for more information. The harbor is preparing the large crane for dismantle shipping out for an overhaul project. This week, we're hoping to use this as a project that would qualify for the allotted 2016 salmon disaster funds. Gloria has been having a bit of a dialogue with the U.S. Army dive team based out of Hawaii for the possibility of using a couple of derelict sinkings as practice for salvage operations. The team is looking at numerous opportunities in Alaska, so we will hear later if we get chosen. The Ira True Street Sewer Project began the week of September 20th. Contractor is making good progress so far, even with our weather. The work will impact traffic on Ira 2 Street for another month. The wastewater department encourages anyone that must walk or drive through this area to be aware of the heavy equipment, abide by traffic control signs, and avoid walking into the active work sites. Public works staff, water and wastewater staff recently removed the 2 mobile restrooms from the municipal parking lot. They are being pumped one last time, cleaned up and winterized. They will be stored at the 14th Street pole yard under cover for the winter. Power and Lights line crew and electrician are preparing for the replacement of the remote substation switch at the Blind Slough substation. All staff is working towards a goal of completing work during the week of October 11th, which is our window of opportunity with the engineer working on the project. However, if this window of opportunity is lost for any number of reasons, we will reschedule the work for early spring. Rock and Road Construction recently completed the installation of a taller fence around the Main Street substation. The fence will offer much better protection to the transformer and buswork in the fencing. Slats have improved the appearance of the facility for the patrons of the public library and users of Centennial Park. We are still waiting to hear from ADOT in regard to the street lighting quote that was sent for Papke's Landing Road, and hopefully we'll get an answer back soon. Property taxes are due October 15th by 4:30 into the finance office. Please remember that a postmark is not considered timely and that the post office has experienced slower wait times. Payments can be made online, over the phone, or dropped off at our box if trying to social distance. And that is everything unless there are questions.
Okay, seeing none, that brings us to item 14, unfinished business, one item there today. And this is an ordinance amending chapters 9.16, 14.04, 14.08, 14.12, and 14.16 of the municipal code to authorize creation and recording of a lien in favor of the borough in order to secure payment of delinquent fees, costs, and expenses. This is the third and final reading. I'd entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-16 in its third and final reading.
Some of.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Stan Gregor. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2021-16 passes unanimously in its third and final reading. Ordinance, new business, first item there, ordinance 2021-15. This is an ordinance updating chapter 9.04 of the municipal code entitled Disease Control to update language and reflect borough incorporation. This is the first reading. The purpose of ordinance 2021-15 is to 1, move the chapter into borough code, 2, amend or remove antiquated language, 3, delete duties that have historically not been performed by the local health officer, 4, delete the health officer's power to compel vaccinations currently provided for in section 9.04.040, 5, add language to ensure that actions of the health officer under 9.04.020 A and B are taken only under the direction of either the borough manager or the borough assembly. 6, include a new section 9.04.040 that outlines the required substance of health officer directives to ensure that directives are factually based, designed to be at least as least restrictive as possible and are in the best interest of the public health. And 7, provide a fine in the event of violation of a directive. new section 9.04.050. I'd entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-15 in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and a second, so discussion. Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting yes today on this in its first reading. I'll have 3 readings, so we'll get to hear from the public. I think this ordinance moved from city council code to borough code. I like the revisions done as evidence to remove some of the archaic and draconian language. It clarifies things, and I think it's I applaud the clerk and manager and the borough attorney for spending time on cleaning this up. It makes sense to me. Thanks.
Any other discussion on this ordinance?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Kensinger.
Yes, I am going to definitely support this ordinance, and I agree with Member Stanton Gregor that it solves some of the problems that we've had with this old ordinance. I think it illustrates something. The first vaccine mandate that occurred before we became a nation occurred in 1777, when George Washington required all of his troops to be vaccinated for smallpox. I was born right about at the time when the first polio vaccine was discovered. And I don't know, everybody that I know has been vaccinated for polio and smallpox. This is not new science. This is how we defeat pandemics. I don't know anybody today that has had a case of smallpox. I do know some older people that are still suffering the effects of polio. And I think this ordinance is an example of how we used to approach public health in our nation, which was pretty draconian. I did not expect that Dr. Trusillo should have the power that's outlined in this ordinance. And I think this makes these changes. But I think this ordinance also is an inflection point for people in the community to think about how we dealt with public pandemics in the past. And that was united, and we all worked together, and it required sacrifices on all of our parts. But specifically what this ordinance does is it gives us the ability as a port community to be able to prevent people that have active cases of whatever types of disease they are from entering our town and compel them to remain on their vessels. That was brought evident this summer when we had a cruise ship that came into town and unloaded several passengers that had active cases of COVID. That's specifically what this ordinance is directed towards. It's not directed towards us developing a quarantine camp or any of the draconian measures that were specified by some members of the public in their letters to the assembly. Thank you.
Is there any other input? Member Lim.
Yeah, if I could ask the manager, has the Mr. Hofstetter and or the hospital board reviewed this ordinance?
CEO Hofstetter has. I can't speak if he passed it on to the hospital board or not, but we ran this through Dr. Trusillo, Phil, our staff, Chief Kerr, and let's see, our attorney. Sandy, did I miss anybody? It was pretty widespread. We tried to make sure everybody had a hand in it and give us advice and take their opinions and ideas into account.
Thank you.
Member Tremblay.
And I just wanted to make a note that this position is being created under the guidance of the borough manager, which is therefore under the assembly. So in terms of how decisions are made or how people could bring issue of any form of action that this person might take in this official capacity, it would be under the assembly's jurisdiction. So I'll be voting yes. It is I encourage the public to look up on the agenda packet to see the old language. The number of steamboat references are quite something, just to give you an idea of how old this language was. So unfortunately, this is the time we're in of needing to update it for future, and hopefully we have another 100 years where maybe they'll need to revisit it from then, but hopefully this is the time and that'll be it. So thank you for the staff's work on this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Member Tremblay said, a couple people who written us letters who were upset about it. I think a good first start would go back and look at the 1973 ordinance. And that lines out what the public health officer could do. I think everybody can agree that it needed to get changed. And I think we've made a good first step in changing it. Like somebody mentioned earlier, I think this is the first reading, and the second reading, if folks have some additions or subtractions to it, I'd like to look at them. But yeah, this is a good start, and I'll be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Any other input? Okay, I will support this ordinance in its first reading, and looking forward to public comments and the dialogue between now and its third reading, I believe, will be November 1st. So we have almost a month for the public to have their input. If there's no other input, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff, Bob, David,
Yes.
Kelsey,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes. Okay, ordinance 2021-15 passes unanimously. I get the number right, yeah. We're now on to the second item under new business, ordinance 2021-17. This is an ordinance updating various provisions of chapter 14.12 of the municipal code entitled sanitation. This ordinance, if adopted, will one, add provisions to address concerns regarding bears accessing refuge containers located in residential neighborhoods, including establishment of a fine for non-compliance. Two, change collection of recyclables from once per week to once every 2 weeks. Three, add a section to address the disposal of vehicles. And four, update collection and on-site disposal rates. I'd entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-17 in its first reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made with a second. Any discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'll lead it off. I'll also be voting yes on this in its first reading. I think for those listening at home, there's a lot to unpack in this ordinance. It covers a variety of topics as evidenced by the mayor read in terms of how we're going to be addressing bears and keeping the refuse in their containers. Switch from that over to switching, potentially switching from recyclables once a week to every 2 weeks. I think for some families that might be a good fit, maybe some not so much. I look forward to hearing from the public on that one. Yeah, I just encourage those listening at home to log on and take a look at this ordinance because it's one that impacts all of us because we all are users of either the Baylor facility or of a curbside pickup. But for the time being, I'm just going to vote yes on it, and maybe we hear from Chris Cotta as far as some information we can refresh the public's mind on in terms of the rate study, things like that. But I'll be voting yes. Thanks.
Any other discussion on this ordinance? Ordinance 2021-17. Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to thank Director Cotta for getting this out for us. I think we've been struggling with bear issues here for a long period of time, many years, and I'm going to be glad when this thing moves forward to passing in its third reading, so that next summer when the bears are out and people are calling and complaining about their garbage cans getting dumped over, we'll have a tool to kind of help mitigate that problem. And garbage cans are still getting knocked over. There's still a few people in town that haven't figured out that bears like to get in the garbage, but yeah, I'm being voting for this. I think it's a good idea and long overdue. So thank you.
Any other input? Member Tremblay.
I just wanted to invite Director Cotta to address anything that you wanted to highlight for the public in this. Given it's the first reading, is there anything you want to highlight now rather than at the third reading? Might be a surprise.
Sure, thank you. I was just going to go over a few things that I guess maybe just expand a little bit on each of the four key points that are outlined in the ordinance intro. The first one, obviously, the one that's been the highest profile lately is adding some provisions to address concerns regarding bears getting the garbage. We've made a few changes, and it's not just for bears, really for any wildlife. Birds are a big problem around here too. If somebody overfills their can, the birds scatter the garbage, and that's that's a problem. You know, bears, of course, are more of a potential hazard to everyone on the street. So they get more press, but we're also concerned with any kind of animal getting into the trash. We've, you know, added some language into the definition section in the ordinance, basically describing what types of measures we're expecting the customers to take. We kind of carried over the language from the existing ordinance that says, you know, customers must make a reasonable effort. We went ahead and we defined what that reasonable effort is, you know, and so hopefully that'll give people a really good idea of how they can keep their garbage secured and you know, help us all out in the community. I did put these provisions together relating to bears, you know, in consultation with our local police department, with the trooper. I also had several conversations with Frank Robbins, the local ADF&G biologist. So I got some great input from them, and that's reflected in, you know, what's in the ordinance as well. So we're hoping that with these proposed changes that the bear problem will be drastically reduced. I heard Ms. Lynn's comments earlier about, well, are you trying to eliminate bears completely? And I don't think anyone expects that there will never be a garbage bear in Petersburg after this would pass, but we're trying to just reduce the number of instances. And I think if we can get this language in place with a little bit of teeth behind the ordinance, that you know, I think it will help a lot. So so another portion of this ordinance deals with the recycling program. That's hasn't been as hot of a topic lately, but you know, it's been a pretty prominent topic in past years. We've had a lot of discussion about the, you know, the value of the recyclables and how the recycling program fits into our overall program, especially in regards to rates. We had our rate consultant, you know, look at several different options for the recycling program moving forward. And we got a lot of input from our customers, and you know, what we landed on was decreasing the frequency of collection, and part of that was driven by just our costs moving forward. You know, a lot of it was, in fact, we've been using 3 collection trucks for quite a while because of the number of routes we have to collect each week for garbage and recyclables. We needed 3 trucks to do all that work. If we reduce our frequency for collecting recyclables to an every other week, we can essentially retire one of those trucks. We won't get rid of it, but it will be placed in reserve status, basically. So it's used only in emergencies if one of our active trucks breaks down. What that allows us to do is to avoid the capital costs of buying that 3rd truck, which is about a $250,000 expenditure. And that has a direct impact on the rate increases we have moving forward. So what the rate consultant had found was if we didn't make any changes to our recycling program, we were probably looking at about a 5% annual increase. Whereas if we go to every other week collections, we can hold that to about a 3% annual increase. And so some changes there. I should also note that the value of recyclable commodities has come up quite a bit recently. It's still not at historic highs, but it's rebounded. Those various commodities that we collect, you know, plastics, paper, aluminum, cardboard, all were really at a low point in their value a couple of years ago. They've all come back, some more than others, but the net result of that is that we had been talking about possibly dropping out some commodities. My last conversation with Republic Services, who provides our shipment and disposal, you know, they encouraged us not to do that at this time. They said they feel like there's enough value in the things that we're collecting now that we don't really need to alter our mix to keep the value of our commingles, you know, at a good level. So, so that was a change from, you know, past months, and a good one for the future of the program. Yeah, so, oh, I also want to talk about the incentive rate, sorry. We, in the proposal that's in front of you, the recycling incentive rate is also left in place. We had started looking at kind of recalibrating all of our rates in anticipation of maybe doing away with a recycling incentive rate because values were so low, because we didn't really want to encourage recycling necessarily as from a revenue perspective. That's not to say it isn't the right thing to do, but it's just, you know, we have to look at the numbers for the department and try to decide what's best overall. But because values have come back up in the direction that the markets seem to be going, we've left that incentive rate in place. And it's possible that, you know, if values go up enough, that the program could even be profitable like it was originally envisioned to be. We're not there yet, but it's the future looks better than it did a year ago for sure, in that regard. So moving on to a different topic, we've also made some changes to the proposed ordinance that would add a section to kind of delineate the borough's expectations in regards to vehicle disposal. This has been an area that we've had a lot of issues with over the years. You know, we want to encourage folks to dispose of derelict vehicles. That's a good thing for the community, not to have them sitting around on the street or in people's yards or whatever. On the other hand, we also need for folks to know that, you know, we're not a vehicle processing center. We don't have a fully equipped mechanic shop where we can deal with, you know, taking out fluids and removing tires and things like that. So that's part of it, is just to sort of lay out our expectations for you know, folks coming in to dispose of vehicles. Another problem we've had is how to recoup our costs for really large vehicles. It seems like we get quite a number of, you know, let's just use an example like 40-foot fiberglass boat. And right now with our current rate structure and policy, you know, we basically charge those folks $75 for disposing of a 40-foot fiberglass boat. What we have to do is basically demolish that boat, break it up, bale it, and ship it out as baled garbage. So it's costing us way more than $75. So we've added a few changes to the rates. Basically, we'll start charging for those types of vehicles per ton. And it's not gonna recover all of our costs, but it'll actually help us maybe not go in the hole quite so much on those bigger vehicles, boats, travel trailers, things like that really don't have any scrap value, because they're just they're materials that it's not metal, it's metal, but it's combined with all kinds of other stuff. So we did make a few changes to the rates to try and recapture a little more of that cost we have disposing of those things. And then of course, the last item that's mentioned in the intro to to the ordinance is the, just updating the rates, which we've talked about with recycling and so forth. We've got, like two major components to our rate structure. One is the collection rates and our 3% increases starting in FY23, going out 5 years. Those are based again on what the rate consultant recommended for an every other week pickup scenario with recycling, and then just general increases. They plugged in basically the increases that we have for personnel, for supplies, and our annual increase for our cost also, which is actually 3.5%. Most costs, I think, were figured at a 3% increase, but our contract for waste disposal is 3.5%. And then the other, besides collections, the other major component of our rate structure is our on-site disposal rates, which is all the various rates for people bringing stuff to our facility to dispose of. And some of those we decided to leave unchanged, and that is, I guess, to encourage certain types of activity at the landfill. We've left salvage permits at the same cost. That's to encourage people to come in and reuse material, out of landfill. We've left traditional vehicle disposal costs, like you have a standard metal-bodied car, truck. We've left those costs the same. Those vehicles do have scrap value, so that's partly a reflection of that. But it's also a reflection of, we just want to encourage people to get those things off the street and up to the landfill where they belong. So sorry, that was probably a lot longer than what you were thinking. You were asking for there, Chelsea, but I did want to just go through a few of those things. And we did have the rate consultant do a presentation back in November. I've spoken to them recently, and they're certainly willing to come back and address the assembly again at a future reading of this ordinance if that's desired. So I'll just kind of await the assembly's direction on that. And then I can take, if anybody else has any questions, I'm ready to talk about it.
Questions of Mr. Khanna?
Yeah.
Dave, I don't see your hand going up. So, all right, thank you for your presentation. Is there any more input on ordinance 2021-17? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark, Jay,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2021-17 passes unanimously in its first reading. Item C under new business, airport COVID testing contract extension. State of Alaska is requesting an extension of the airport COVID testing contract for an additional $1,222,750 for services performed October 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2022. I'd entertain a motion to approve this request.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made with a second. Discussion. Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So currently, are we doing airport testing up there? We are. So we have a booth up there and all that kind of stuff. So this is just getting money for what we're doing. All right, thank you.
Right now, the testing is done at the medical center.
Correct.
Sorry, when I'm shaking my head, they are performing airport testing. It's just taking place at the hospital. I apologize.
Okay, and is this contract, this extension gonna be with Petersburg Medical Center or goes through the borough, or how does that work, Sandy?
So the borough has kind of been the parent with the state because it was our issue. And then the hospital, we have an MOA with the hospital. So it goes through the borough.
Any other discussion on the airport testing contract extension? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay, Chelsea, Bob,
Yes.
Testing contract extension passes unanimously. That brings us to item D under new business, approval of letter to the Petersburg Ranger District regarding improvements to the Ravens Roost Trail and Cabin. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board requests the Assembly to join them in a letter drafted to the Petersburg Ranger District expressing thanks for the improvements to the Ravens Roost Trail and Cabin. I'd entertain a motion to approve this letter.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made with the second. Any discussion? Member Trively.
Yeah, I was the one who asked to put it on from last meeting, and we tend to send letters when we have problems. It's also nice to send letters of thank yous. So I'm looking forward to voting yes.
Perfect. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll join the Parks and Rec Board and send a letter to item E, approval of election officials. Clerk Thompson requests approval of the following borough residents to serve as election officials during the municipal election tomorrow, October 5th, 2021. Liz Bacon, Tim Chittenden, Sue Flint, and Janice Kernvik. I'd entertain a motion to approve these four people.
So move. Second.
There's been a motion with a second. Any, there's no discussion, or is there discussion? Member Van Gerger.
No discussion, just a brief thank you so much to all the election officials. We couldn't carry off successful elections without them, so thank you so much for giving of your time.
Clerk Thompson, you had some input?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to add one more name if I could, please. Stacy Lure.
Okay, if there's no other discussion or input, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff, Mark, Chelsea.
Yes.
Thank you.
At the beginning of the meeting, we amended the agenda to add item 15F. And this is to amend the agenda to have a meeting to certify the election. That will be Friday, October 8th at 12 noon. That's what that was put on the agenda. Is there a motion for that?
So move.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on that? Member Stanton Gregor.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, made sure we had a quorum, as I will not be able to attend the noon meetings. I'll be on the morning jet that day. No, I don't need to be there for it as long as there's an active quorum to carry it through.
Okay, well, I don't know if Member Norheim will be here. I possibly will be able to call in unless I'm dragging a moose out. So we have hands up that could be here at noon on Friday the 8th. We have two.
I could do
Mr.
9.
Mayor, I'll be able to,
You will be able to attend?
yes, Mr. Mayor.
Those three, and Member Stanton Gregor will be gone. We could change the time. I mean.
Can we make it earlier?
Yeah, I could
what-
definitely do earlier. If the body were so inclined, I could gladly chair it at 9 a.m. since it'll be moose hunting, and that I can.
Let's move the time, if the assembly agrees, to 9 a.m. on the 8th. Okay, so it looks like we'll have a quorum, and so all those in favor of having a special meeting to certify the election of tomorrow to October 8th at 9 a.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chelsea,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob, David,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I will try to call in, but thank you, Member Stanton Gregor and the assembly for changing that time. That brings us to communications, unless I missed something in the change of the agenda earlier, but I don't see any communications listed, but any communications that the borough or assembly have received will be listed on our website and be put on our next agenda. Assembly discussion items, 17, transboundary salmon rivers. We had some input and testimony earlier in the meeting. Assembly member Mucci requested this discussion item. The Southeast Alaska Indigenous Transboundary Commission and Salmon Beyond Borders request the assembly sign on to the Rivers That Feed Us resolution. So member Mucci, since you asked for this to be under discussion, you can have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, as you see, it's just a discussion item for today, with the plan being having this as an action item at the next meeting here in October. We've heard from several people who talked about this. We'll hear probably again at the next meeting more about it. I mean, I think this is a very important issue to Petersburg. A lot of us are involved with some of the issues going on up in Pebble Mine or Bristol Bay. And that's the place where we work and we don't live, but these rivers that we're talking about impact some of our neighbors in Wrangell. It impacts the commercial fisheries around Southeast Alaska and especially Petersburg. And it's just as a discussion item today. I won't go into any length about it, but the idea is, like I said earlier, is to have this as an action item at the next meeting in October. So thank you.
Berlin?
Yeah, I took this on quite a while ago, actually about 2 months ago, right when it first came out. And with the help of the clerk, she dug out our past 3 resolutions and our motions to, I think was adding water quality and so forth. And from that, I made a rough draft of a resolution that we could support. And our clerk had sent that to Mr. Lynch. From that, we had Mr. Lynch, myself, Ms. Hardcastle, and Mr. Rolsman had about an hour conversation on this. My argument was is that whatever we did we have to own it. Has to be from us. And since we've had some past resolutions, what we were drafting was pretty much based on what our past ones. But at any rate, after that discussion, I committed to go back and to relook at some of the couple items that they felt very strongly about. One of them had to do with the moratorium on any kind of additional mining. And I agreed to go take a look at that because that part was not in what we had drafted. In the interim, I don't know if you've seen last week's article in the pilot, but Wrangell has some of the same problems that I was concerned about. And they're in the process of drafting their own resolution to go along with it. But anyway, I would certainly be glad to hand over to Member Mucci what I have here and let him take it over if you'd like to do that.
Thank you, Member Lynn. Member Stanton Greger.
No, it's more of a question for the clerk. Has it already been clarified that it'll be on the next meeting agenda as an action item?
Not unless someone,
I would like to give you that direction right now, if I could, Clerk Thompson.
I'll just need something to put on the agenda as an action item.
Sure.
Of course. I will put a placeholder.
Thank you, Clerk Thompson.
I agree with Member Lynn. I think we need to look closely at the resolution that's been presented to us that they're calling for support on and maybe tweak it a little bit, but we need to come up with our own language that represents Petersburg's thoughts, in my opinion. So I guess we'll talk about it the next meeting on the 18th, I believe. Okay, any other discussion items? We didn't add any to the meeting agenda, so Assembly member comments. Any comments from Assembly members? Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This time of year, I'm a bit of a broken record, but I'm going to do it again. As the mayor mentioned in his mayor's report, tomorrow, Tuesday, October 5th, is Local Democracy Day. It is our opportunity and responsibility to turn out and vote. And the beauty of it is, many of them, but one in particular is, it buys you a ticket to complain or to celebrate. If you don't vote, you don't really get to celebrate or complain about the results. So go forth tomorrow and purchase your ticket to celebrate or complain about local democracy. So I'd really like to see 1,200 people vote tomorrow. We usually hover right around 1,000. Let's get over 1,200. Every vote counts. Thank you.
Clerk Thompson mentioned earlier that we have over 500 absentee votes.
About 500,
About
yes.
500. Any other Assembly members have comments? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On this weekend, we got a report from Steve about how the power outage was resolved. And, for me, it was really, really impressive. We heard a little bit earlier about it, who helped out, but, we had Public Works, Power and Light, DOT, the fire department and volunteers showed up. We had 2 EMTs show up. Admin staff showed up. It was just really impressive to see when the lights go out in Petersburg, how quickly everybody can work together to solve a problem. And I was really impressed I'd like to see that problem solving ethic with the rest of the community dealing with COVID. But for me, that was a bright spot. When the power goes out here, I am pretty confident it's going to be back on in a couple hours. And just a big thank you to everybody who was involved in it. It's pretty impressive. All the mechanics that go on to make that happen. And I appreciate all the hard work. So thank you.
Member Tremblay?
I wanted to add on to that because we got this amazing write-up from Director Hagerman lining out by name who was doing what and how much work was going into it. And then it was a friend of mine who mentioned their encounter with Director Hagerman standing in the pouring down rain, redirecting his car away from the fallen down line. So you missed that part in your email, Director Hagerman. So yeah, thank you everybody for their part this weekend. And hopefully we all get to enjoy a little bit of the sunshine after that last little spell.
Okay, any other assembly members have comments today? Member Kinsinger, do you have any input?
No, I just want to thank Carl for his excellent write-up. Although I'm out of town right now, it was very informative, and I want to thank everybody and for all the hard work they did to make sure the lights stayed on and they fixed everything that was broken. And I think that's a good testament to Carl himself as well.
Any other assembly members have comments? Brings us to recognitions. Are there any recognitions from the staff? Recognition to member Norheim for his 3 years of dedication to the community. Interesting perspective at the table, and I miss that perspective. I just want to thank him very much for his time. Recognition? Seeing none, then we go to motion to adjourn. So moved. All those in favor say aye.